I work as a bartender at a bustling bar and restaurant just outside of Baltimore. The place has a unique setup. There are no waiters, just bartenders like me and the cooks in the back. If you want food or non-alcoholic drinks, you order at the bar, and when it's ready, you pick it up from the counter. I'm not sure why management runs things this way, but I assume it's a cost-cutting measure to avoid hiring waitstaff. Either way, it keeps the pace fast, which I actually enjoy. For some reason, the place is incredibly popular, even though I don't think it's anything special. The atmosphere is always lively, with great music, a buzzing crowd, and a standing area near the DJ booth where people gather to dance and socialize. The constant flow of customers makes the shifts fly by, which suits me. I'd probably go insane if I had to stand around waiting between orders. That particular night started off like any other. It was a weekend, so I braced myself for chaos. Around a certain time, the bar started filling up, mostly with a younger college crowd. That meant more dancing, more spilled drinks, and a generally rowdier vibe. Oh, and worse tips, which was a downside for me. One group of students kept ordering round after round of tequila shots, faster than I could line up the salt and limes. One guy was so drunk he used the same pickup line on me 3 times. Amid the madness, I noticed an elderly couple walk in and take a seat in the corner booth of the restaurant. At first glance, there was nothing particularly strange about them, just that they seemed out of place in such a loud, youthful environment. Still, I was too busy to dwell on it. About 30 minutes to an hour later, while pouring a line of gin and tonics, I caught sight of them again. My hands worked on autopilot, but my brain fixated on them. Something was off. They hadn't moved. They weren't eating, weren't drinking, hadn't ordered anything at all. I would have remembered. Even stranger, they weren't looking at each other. Both were staring at the wall beside them, completely still. From what I could tell, they weren't speaking either. A weird feeling crawled over me, but I pushed it aside. Maybe they were waiting for someone or confused about how to order. When I finally had a break, I decided to check on them. As I approached, I put on my best polite smile, but neither of them turned to acknowledge me. They just kept staring at the wall, frozen like statues. I cleared my throat and asked if they wanted anything to eat or drink. The woman didn't move. The man, however, turned his head, slowly, almost unnaturally slow. When his face came into view, a chill ran through me. His skin was eerily pale, wrinkled but almost stretched too tight over his bones. His eyes were sunken, dark hollows that barely seemed alive. He didn't say a word, just stared at me before shaking his head, once firmly and silently. Something about his gaze made my stomach twist. I muttered a response and hurried back to the bar, shaken. There was something deeply wrong about them, like they didn't belong in this century, let alone in this bar. I avoided looking at their booth for a long time. The night carried on, and I busied myself with orders, trying to shake the unease. But eventually, curiosity got the best of me, and I glanced over. They were both staring directly at me. My breath caught in my throat. I made direct eye contact with the woman, but she didn't look away. Her unblinking gaze bore into me like she could see something I didn't even know was there. I forced myself to look away and pretended to be busy, my hands shaking. When I finally dared to look again, the booth was empty. Relief washed over me, though it felt unnatural. I was just glad they were gone. But as I wiped down the bar at closing, the encounter lingered in my mind. My coworker, Karen, had been there for years. She noticed everything, so I asked her if she had seen anything strange that night. Her confused expression made my stomach drop. "What are you talking about?" she asked. "The elderly couple in the corner booth," I said, my voice uneasy. She shook her head. "No one like that came in tonight." I stared at her. "Are you sure?" She crossed her arms and proceeded to list at least 10 different customers who had ordered food that night, describing their outfits in detail. I laughed it off, pretending it didn't shake me. But inside, I was losing it. I knew what I had seen. By the time we locked up, I had started questioning my own sanity. Had I imagined them? Had Karen somehow missed them? Were they even real? I was still reeling as I walked to my car, but then I saw something that made my blood run cold. Across the street, beneath the dim glow of a streetlight, stood 2 dark figures. I knew it was them. They were watching me. Panic seized my chest. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My hands fumbled with my keys before I threw myself into my car, locked the doors, and sped out of the lot without a no. Panic seized my chest. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My hands fumbled with my keys before I threw myself into my car, locked the doors, and sped out of the lot without another glance. The drive home was hell. My thoughts raced in circles, my pulse hammering. Over and over I kept whispering, "Oh my God," to myself, trying to ground my spiraling mind. I never saw them again, never got an explanation, and I don't think I ever will. I don't have the most exciting life, but it's comfortable. I'm 40, single, no kids. Some people might find that depressing, but honestly, I don't mind. I have a steady job, a decent house, and no one to answer to but myself. I work as a bartender at a high-end luxury rooftop bar in a neighboring town, catering to the kind of clientele who think regular bars are beneath them. I don't live anywhere near that level of luxury myself. My place is in a pretty middle-of-the-pack neighborhood about 20 minutes away, but working there has its perks. The tips are amazing. People in that area aren't shy about throwing money around, and the rotating crowd keeps things interesting. Since the bar is upscale, we don't have the typical regulars you find in a dive. I like that. I've never been a fan of customers getting too familiar with me or any other bartender, for that matter. Maybe that's just me. I prefer to keep to myself. I should probably mention that my name's Kevin. That'll be important later. It was a Friday night, our busiest night. The place was packed as usual, filled with groups of friends clinking glasses, couples on date nights, and a few folks who probably wandered in just to feel important. I always play a mental game with my patrons, trying to figure out which ones are pretending to be something they're not. You can tell a lot about people by the way they order a drink. The ones who ask for complicated cocktails are usually trying to impress someone. The ones who order a whiskey neat, they've had a day. I had my eye on a couple at the end of the bar, down to their last sips of wine. It's always better to offer a refill before they wave you down. I was in my groove, mixing drinks and chatting with customers, when I noticed someone walk in who definitely looked out of place. I clocked the guy immediately. He was clenching his teeth and scowling like he was furious. His jet black hair was messy, sitting like a bird's nest on his forehead. He wore a black hoodie under a faded leather jacket that looked like it hadn't been cleaned in years. There were stains all over it, but none of that was as unsettling as his face. He just looked so angry. He made a beeline for the bar, but didn't sit down. Just stood there, staring at me. I wondered how he had gotten past the doorman in the lobby. Clearing my throat, I asked if I could get him something to drink, trying to keep my tone neutral despite the weird vibe he was giving off. He didn't answer right away. He just kept glaring at me, like he was getting ready to swing. Finally, he muttered that he wanted a double shot of Jaeger. I nodded, grabbed a glass, and poured the shot. Jaeger isn't a drink we pour often here. Most of our patrons ask for something a little higher quality. But hey, if someone wants Jaeger, I'm not about to question their taste. I set the glass in front of him and moved on to serve a few other patrons. When I came back to charge him, he tossed crumpled cash onto the counter. That also threw me off. Hardly anyone pays in cash at this place. Again, though, it wasn't my place to judge. He didn't say anything as I rang him up, and I was ready to move on when he spoke again. I still remember his exact words. "I knew I'd find you here, Kevin." I froze. My eyes snapped to his as I scrambled to process what he'd just said. I put the glass in my hand down and demanded to know how he knew my name. I didn't want to make a scene, so I kept my voice low, but I hoped he understood how serious I was. He didn't answer my question, just kept staring at me with that same angry intensity. Finally, he said, "I know what you did." Before I could ask him what he meant, he turned and walked toward the elevators. I wanted to yell something or chase after him, but I decided against it. I was on the clock. I couldn't just neglect my job. Instead, I just stood there for a moment, completely thrown off. I was honestly confused out of my mind. I didn't recognize him in the slightest. I couldn't think of anything I'd done that would warrant such a cryptic statement. I'm no saint, but I don't go around making enemies. It put me in a sour mood for the rest of the night. When my shift finally ended, I drove home, but I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened earlier. I racked my brain for any explanation that made sense but came up empty. By the time I went to bed, I was still unsettled. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up randomly. I wasn't sure what had woken me. I didn't have to use the bathroom, and I usually sleep through the night. I didn't hear or see anything, but something felt off. Without moving, I kept my eyes open, waiting for them to adjust to the darkness. After about a minute, I saw something that sent an adrenaline rush of fear through me. There was a dark mass in the corner of my room, next to the door. It was just standing there, but I was 100% sure it didn't belong in my room. My heart started to race, but I forced myself to stay still, pretending. I knew I had to do something. I counted silently to 3, and in one quick motion, sprang out of bed, screaming like a madman. I was prepared for a fight, but the figure didn't come toward me. Instead, he bolted for the door. As he moved, I heard something clatter to the floor. I chased after him through my house, but by the time I reached the front door, it was wide open, and whoever had been in my room was gone. I wanted to run out into the yard to look for him, but I worried I'd be walking into a trap. Instead, I made what I still think was the smart decision. I slammed the door shut and locked it. I thought back to the clatter I'd heard earlier in my room. I walked back to my bedroom, turned on the light, and froze. In the corner of the room, there was a knife lying on the floor, one of mine, taken from the kitchen. I felt sick. Whoever I had just chased was planning to hurt me, possibly kill me. I called the police right after that. They quickly arrived and searched both my house and my yard, but found nothing. I gave a description of the man from the bar, and the police retrieved the video footage, but they haven't been able to find him yet. I haven't heard anything since. The thing that freaks me out the most? I know for a fact I locked all my doors that night. I lock them every night. During their search, the police couldn't figure out how he got inside. None of the windows were broken or unlocked, and there was no sign of forced entry. To this day, I still have no idea how he got in. I haven't seen him since, but I'd be lying if I said I don't think about that encounter often. I work as a bartender at a bar and restaurant in a suburb just outside Baltimore. It's a busy place with a unique setup. There are no waiters, just bartenders like me, and the cooks in the back. If customers want food or non-alcoholic drinks, they have to order at the bar and pick them up from the counter when they're ready. I'm not sure why management runs things this way, but I suspect it's to save money by not hiring wait staff. Either way, the fast-paced environment suits me. I love meeting new people, and constant motion makes my shifts fly by. That night started like any other. It was the weekend, so the place was packed, mostly with a younger college crowd. More dancing, more spilled drinks, a rowdier atmosphere in general, and, unfortunately, worse tips. A group of students kept ordering round after round of tequila shots, barely giving me enough time to line up the salt and limes before demanding another round. One guy was so drunk he tried the same pickup line on me 3 times. Amid the chaos, I noticed an elderly couple enter and sit in a corner booth. Nothing seemed strange at first, just an unusual choice of venue for people their age. I didn't dwell on it. I had too much to do. Maybe 30 minutes later, I caught sight of them again. They hadn't ordered anything. No food, no drinks. Just sitting there, unmoving. And not just that, they weren't even looking at each other. Both were staring at the wall beside them, eerily still. My gut told me something was off, but I was too busy to investigate right away. When I finally had a break, I decided to check on them. As I approached, neither of them turned to acknowledge me. The woman didn't react at all, her gaze locked on the wall like she hadn't heard me. The man, however, moved, slowly, too slowly. When his face came into view, a chill ran through me. His skin was ashen, his features sunken, his eyes hollow. He didn't speak. He just stared at me and gave a single firm shake of his head. The way he looked at me made my stomach twist. I muttered something polite and quickly returned to the bar, shaken. They looked like they didn't belong in this era. Hell, maybe not even in this world. I made a point not to look their way again for a long time. Eventually, the rush died down, and curiosity got the better of me. I glanced over at the booth and nearly dropped the glass in my hand. They were staring at me, both of them, unblinking, unmoving. I locked eyes with the woman, expecting her to look away. She didn't. I turned back to the bar, forcing myself to act busy, trying to ignore the crawling sensation on my skin. When I finally glanced back, the booth was empty. Relief washed over me. I didn't care where they'd gone. I was just glad they weren't there anymore. Later that night, as I wiped down the counter, I casually asked my coworker, Karen, if she had noticed the elderly couple. Karen had worked here for years and prided herself on remembering every customer. Her confused expression sent a shiver down my spine. "What couple?" she asked. I stared at her. The old man and woman sitting in the corner booth. They were there for hours. She shook her head. "No one like that came in tonight. Are you feeling okay?" I laughed it off, but inside, panic was creeping in. I asked if she was sure. She rattled off a list of customers she had seen, what they ordered, what they were wearing, but no mention of the couple. By the time we locked up, doubt gnawed at my mind. Had I imagined them? Was I losing it? Then as I walked to my car, I saw something that nearly made me drop my keys. Across the street, under the glow of a single streetlight, 2 dark figures stood perfectly still, watching me. I knew it was them. I wanted to scream, but my voice wouldn't come. I didn't wait. I jumped into my car, locked the doors, and sped out of the lot without looking back. The drive home was a blur. My hands trembled on the wheel as I whispered, "Oh my God," over and over. The questions swarmed my mind. Had Karen really missed them? Were they even real? Was I losing my grip on reality? I wish I had an answer, but I never saw them again, never got an explanation, and I don't think I ever will.